Hello, welcome, and today we are starting our first ever podcast, the Tall Guys Podcast. I'm here with Luke Guest, and we are going to be talking about all things sports, but today we're going to talk about the World Cup, some NBA. I am not personally a great World Cup person, that's why I had Luke join me. Luke, let's talk about the final today, Germany and Argentina. What do you think about the outcome of the game?
I thought it was a great game. It was a deserving game between the two sides. It's not often where you see something that's 0-0 for so long be so entertaining. I think it had equal parts entertainment, equal parts, toughness and stuff like that. I really wanted Argentina to pull it out because I'm a huge Lionel Messi fan. But respects to Germany and the job that they did, job well done they did in the World Cup tournament this year.
Let's talk about the impact this World Cup has had on specifically the United States. You see a lot of people in support of soccer, and before the World Cup there wasn't as much of a following. So let's talk about the World Cup and what it means for, say, the Major League Soccer and soccer in America.
Well, I think in an incremental way, I think that the World Cup is starting to get bigger and bigger in America. In 2010, when it was in South Africa, the U.S. had a couple of very dramatic finishes to games there, and that was when those YouTube videos were popping up of people in bars across the United States all celebrating, and that's kind of been the modern benchmark for how soccer is growing in America. I mean, you look at crowds in Seattle and Portland and elsewhere in the Northwest, Vancouver included, they draw huge crowds to their stadiums for their games. I believe the Seattle Sounders of the MLS, they actually sell out Quest Field, which is where the Seattle Seahawks play during the football season. So the influx is obviously driven by the World Cup, and it's really nice to see because being a fan of the sport for as long as I've been, which isn't that long because it's not like I'm an old man, but being a fan of the sport as long as I have been, it's refreshing to see more and more interest just kind of grow. So it's like if World Cup 2010 interest in soccer was here, and then every 4 years it kind of dips a little bit, and then the next World Cup it goes up to here, and then it dips a little bit, and the next World Cup it goes up to there. I mean, there's creation of MLS clubs that are happening in a bunch of major cities, and it's just a really exciting time to be a soccer fan in America.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to Colin Cowherd on ESPN Radio a lot, and he does a lot of stats about the viewership of the World Cup, and on average for each World Cup game, they're averaging about 18.2 million viewers worldwide, which is a lot more than what people expected. And during the U.S.-Portugal game, there were 25 million people watching combined on ESPN and Univision, which is a big stat. That shows you that people are watching soccer, and it's really has to do with the big names, Messi, Neymar, Ronaldo. Those are the type of players that people want to watch, and I think it's a lot like basketball. Those big names are what drive people to watch, and there's just a collection of there was a big collection of great players, and it made it exciting to watch. And it's funny enough that the team that didn't have a big name on it, but was the team they won it. So.
So it's exactly like what happened with the NBA Finals. I mean, look at this between the Spurs and the Heat. Now, granted, the Heat have more than one person, but really, in the end, it's all about the king, and and that's just indicative of sport. Period. I mean, you can talk about Peyton Manning as much as you want, but when he's coming up against the Legion of Boom, he doesn't stand a chance because a lot of the great sports that we follow, team sports like that, are just that. They are team sports, and so they obviously were the better prepared team. Argentina had some, they had some injuries and stuff like that, going towards the final. And but that's just going to happen, and one man can't do it all, which is exactly what you're saying. So I think there's a lot of similarities between this World Cup and this past year's NBA Finals.
Yeah, absolutely. What about Major League Soccer? I mean, it's growing for sure, but you don't see guys like Ronaldo or Messi in Major League Soccer. You see them playing internationally. So, what is it going to take for Major League Soccer to land one of those guys and maybe go to that next level as being something that people are going to watch just as much as the World Cup?
Well, I think the World Cup is an anomaly, obviously. In America, we're big fans of the Olympics, obviously, because we're pretty good at them. I think that that's the kind of level that we can attain. Obviously, us being from the South, football seems to just gonna be king forever. But in essence of this World Cup final, over 800 million people tuned in to watch it live, just for the final alone. So you're talking about a large amount of viewership that's worldwide and in America just for this Sunday afternoon game. The cool thing is that as the MLS is maturing and as the U.S.'s performances in the World Cup get better and better, or in international competitions, period, get better and better, what ends up happening is players will come over from other leagues like Italy and England and Spain. They come over here when they're 35, 36 years old, and they're past their prime, but they still want to play. Right now, the state of play in the MLS is not really, top tier leagues in the world. But what's happening is as the league gets better and better, these stars come across the pond at younger and younger ages. So, for instance, next year there's going to be 2 new teams added to the MLS. One is in New York, and another one's in Orlando. And both teams have landed. New York has landed 3 marquee signing, like huge names in world soccer. They're older, or they're washed up, or they haven't really had that good of goal scoring luck or whatever. And so they're going to try to, try their luck here. And what happens is, if you look at players who have gone and played internationally, like Tim Cahill from the New York Red Bulls, even Landon Donovan, he played in England as well. Clint Dempsey is another good example. Those guys are the elites of the MLS. So in essence, if you're trained at all in Europe at the faster game and you come over to America to play, you will be the superstar. And I think that that's what people are attracted to as far as players being able to come over. I've heard a rumor in 2017 that a Brazilian-owned club will be brought about in Miami, and that'll include names like Robinho, who's been kind of absent in the Brazilian leagues of soccer. Cristiano Ronaldo has been rumored to say he wants to join. Trying to think who else is. But there's other players that are wanting to join that because they're Brazilian as well. And so they have like a connection with the owner and stuff. So there's a lot of momentum behind the MLS, and you just got to hope that the revenue stream keeps it going and stays afloat.
And that the same Miami team that LeBron and David Beckham have gotten behind?
Yeah, David Beckham has gotten behind. LeBron has stated interest. Now, obviously, as of recent events, I don't know how sure that is as far as where he wants his investment to go. But we've seen that LeBron is very invested in soccer. So is stars like Kobe and Steve Nash. They've all. Steve Nash is very big in the Canadian soccer team. His brother plays for Rangers FC in Scotland, and so he's always been about the soccer. He's made those YouTube videos with Landon Donovan and stuff that are hilarious. Mm-hmm. And Kobe, he's a huge fan of the Brazilian game. I wouldn't be surprised if he was just at all the World Cup games. Huge fan of soccer. And LeBron, with his stake in Liverpool, I think that he shows an interest and also notices where the real money is at. Now, obviously, MLS clubs aren't exactly the top-heavy money grabbers of the world as far as soccer goes, but LeBron understands, good investments. Obviously, he's got really good business sense. And so I'm encouraged by the fact that, he wants to invest in the league in that way. Now, if Miami will even let him come back in town, that's be another discussion for another day. But But it's really cool to see like big stars in other sports wanting to cultivate that interest. It's awesome for a soccer fan like me.
Look, we kind of talked about it a little bit before, but with the World Cup, why should I, or why is the entire world tuning in so much to this World Cup? Like, why wasn't I intrigued in 2010 as I am today? Like, what do you think is the reason behind all that?
Well, I think it was it was 6 one way, half a dozen another, because of how the U.S. and their draw and their group, they faced two really high-profile teams and the team that knocked us out last time. So there's history there if you've been following. But even if you haven't been following, you know that Cristiano Ronaldo is one of the best players in the world, and we're playing against him. Germany, even if you're just a casual fan, Germany's really good at soccer as a team. And so, that kind of buzz generated around us as we began to play. But I think also technology has vastly improved. I mean, even from 4 years ago, you've got things happening live, the evolution of Twitter and how that has become instantaneous news. Rule changes like goal line technology and stuff like that. I mean, the game is just improving. It's more easily accessible now than it was 4 years or 8 years ago. And I think you're really seeing an influx of interest here in America, mostly because we can get behind the international side of pretty much any sport. Like, if you watch the Olympics and you're watching curling, you're going for the USA, right? You don't really know anything about curling, but you're like, go USA, and then you win, you're like pumped up for a second because you're like, all right, gold medal. But, I don't know. I mean, like, coming from your background, I mean, if you haven't been following soccer this whole time, like, what made you want to watch? Is it because other people were watching, or is it because something piqued your interest?
Well, for me, I am just a sports junkie, so I can watch highlights of soccer usually and be fine. But for me, I have friends that are really into especially when the U.S. was still in it. They were saying it was a pride thing. If you're not watching the World Cup, you're not watching the U.S. men's national team, you're not American. For me, I never grew up playing soccer. I never really watched soccer. I was always a basketball guy or a baseball guy. So, but to answer your question, it's really it is because it's on, and there's not only so many baseball highlights you can watch on ESPN, and only so many free agency rumors that you can watch. So, like today, I had an assignment for one of my classes where I had to watch the entire game and write a story in 30 minutes afterwards. And in other games that I've watched, today's game was very defensive, so it was for non-diehard soccer fan, I was getting a little antsy. But I mean, it was enjoyable because there was a lot of different aspects to it.
Even football hits in that game.
Yeah, exactly. There were concussions. There were controversies on offsides on a early Argentinian goal. Like there was intriguing parts, and that is encouraging to me because whenever I found myself watching the U.S. game elimination game while I was working out, and I stopped to watch, and everyone in the gym stopped to watch the game in the last an extra time, and whenever we almost had a chance to tie it, and it was just, and you could tell the devastation, and that's encouraging because soccer has always had the stigma, at least to some of the guys that have criticisms about it, that it's been boring, or it's been not enough goals. There's not enough goal. I'm not going to set a full 120-minute game, 2-hour game, and not see anybody score. Like, that's boring. But I think it's intriguing and it's encouraging that they're getting more enjoyable to watch, and I think it just makes it great. Another point, I think that soccer is it's a reactionary sport. The game is based on reaction. You have to react to your defender and stuff, and there's glimpses of things that something doesn't look like you're going to have a chance to score, and then one kick to the right, and you're into a wide open teammate that has a shot on the goal. It's a reactionary game, and it's very interesting to see those little occurrences and just see it develop. And that's with the sports junkie in me. I can see those types of plays, and those happen to be highlight plays. But if you really watch it, you see plays within that aren't highlight plays that they have the chance and builds up. So yeah, I would say that it's getting to a point where it's not just because everyone's watching it, but now it's starting to get to a point where I can watch it and not be bored like I used to.
Well, it's the same thing about like following hockey, for instance. Like when you first watch a hockey game, you have no idea where the puck is. You have no idea what to really watch for. You don't know what offsides is. You don't know what icing is. But it's kind of like you have to make yourself try it. Like you have to make yourself actually watch game after game, to where it's not so much you can watch the puck, but you expect where the puck is based on the body language of the players and stuff like that. And it's the same thing with soccer. I mean, the more you watch it and the more you get into it, the more you see behind every pass, or like, man, that goal scoring chance started way back here, when he missed this tackle or when he made that pass. And so, it's called a beautiful game for a reason. But I had another question for you. I mean, like, if you're talking from a baseball perspective, like you only watched baseball and basketball growing up, and I was the same way, how do you feel about the decline of Major League Baseball in retrospect to the ascendancy of the MLS, and how the viewership ratings are vastly different?
That's actually very interesting. A lot of people you have conversations with say they only really like to watch baseball when they go to a live game, but they can't stand to watch it on ESPN or on TV. And for me, just growing up in a baseball household, my whole family's from St. Louis, as you know, and so we grew up Cardinals fans, and so it was just kind of in our blood that you watched Cardinal games. And so for me, it's easier, and I also played baseball whenever I was young for 8 years almost, so it's easier for me to watch. But the average person is not going to sit there and watch baseball, so it's starting to decline. Because also there's been, I think, me growing up, I was in love with Mark McGwire and the duel with Sammy Sosa and the whole steroid age of 60-plus homers for one player in a year. That was exciting, and that was the real, like, I don't know, a lot of people don't like to say this who are anti-steroids, and I am too, but that was heyday for people for modern day baseball.
Well, that was the pinnacle of achievement. I mean, you're talking about McGwire, Sosa, Bonds,
all that. So now that they've cracked down, and I don't think that has a real correlation to a decline in production, because there's guys that,
I think it's just that doubt that it puts in people's minds about it.
And so. And another thing that Colin Cowherd says all the time is he wants to go to a game and see a 7-6 with multiple home run game instead of a pitching duel with a 1-0 score. Like he wants to go. Like if he goes, he pays the money to sit there. He wants to, with his kids. He wants to he wants to watch a fun game, and that's something that has and contributed to the decline of baseball, is because there are a lot of great pitchers out there, and there aren't a lot of giant stars. Like the major or the all-star roster, there were some questionable people added to the Major League Baseball all-star rosters, because there's not any big names besides up-and-comers like Trout and Puig, and then there's Clayton Kershaw and pitchers that are, and Miguel Cabrera and different things and different players like that. Those are pretty good players, but they don't have the same type of household name like old baseball players used to have. And so I think that's contributed to the decline. And then with soccer, it's just gotten to a point where it's getting more interesting.
No choice but to be a fan.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it's a lot easier to watch soccer now for people who, if you look at it from a fan who doesn't know either sport that well, I think it's easier to watch soccer because there's a lot more movement, a lot going on, and something can happen out of nowhere.
And no commercials.
Yeah, and there's penalties, and there's yellow cards and red cards and stuff, and there's, in my opinion, we can talk about this another time, but with soccer, I found myself rolling my eyes so many times today with so many flops, especially being an NBA guy, and how people say the NBA is getting terrible with flopping, and then I watch soccer, and I'm like, oh man. And then you realize, like today, I don't know who the guy was, but he got elbowed in the face, and it looked like nothing, and then the next shot, he has blood running down his face. Mm-hmm. So there's give and take. There's some flops and some like get a metal.
Well, I think the physicality in soccer is often misunderstood because it doesn't seem like much to us, but if you got two guys challenging for a header, there's a 50-50 chance you're going to bump heads, and that just happens, and that's part of the bravery of trying to do that in the field. And so, we'll get into that the other time, but flopping is always a talking point. They used to give out yellow cards for simulation, which was for that reason. But without the benefit of instant replay, or because they're never. That's the thing, they're just like baseball umpires. Up until 2 years ago, they were limited to what they saw in real time, and so still antiquated, still part of the game. The referee is just as much a part of the game as the two teams are, which a lot of people will be like, well, that's not how it should be. It should just be the two teams competing. But at the same time, it's the interpretation of the rules of the game, which is the same for the NBA. So, I'm a huge NBA fan too, and so it's easy for me to kind of see that parallel and be okay with it because, my hometown team has one of the worst floppers in the league. So, it's fine with me. But let's switch to that, actually, the NBA, and talking about free agency. Here it is, Sunday. So we're finally at the end, tonight at midnight. So we can actually hammer out some topics and stuff. So obviously the news of the day is LeBron moving to Cleveland. Yeah. You were not really that surprised. No. I was surprised that I thought he was going to stay in Miami myself, because I thought that maybe he had bought into Shabazz Napier being drafted, that he was getting Wade to opt in to re-sign with the team, and they're going to let go of Bosh and get somebody else in there. But he decided not to do that, and he came out with a great letter and great piece, and did it all the right way, and just really showed a sign of him maturing from where he was 4 years ago.
Absolutely. Like you said, I wasn't that surprised. I've been a LeBron fan since he was in high school. I have multiple Cavaliers jerseys and multiple Cavaliers hoodies and stuff like that, strictly because of LeBron, and you can call me a bandwagoner if you want, but I'm an educated fan.
Aren't they all?
I wasn't that surprised because of just the pull that Cleveland has on his heart. I knew that because he's been talking about how sometime in his career he wants to go back. He just didn't know when. Right. And you could just see it in his face, especially Game 5 of the finals. He was doing everything. He led the finals in scoring. He led in assists on his team. He led in, I'm pretty sure he led in rebounds as well. He was doing it all himself. And Wade was non-existent. Bosh was averaging like 9 points a game. He was tired. He was back to Cleveland. Back to Cleveland in 2010, doing everything himself. And that's not what he went to Miami for. And right. He could tell that he had an opportunity to mentor, be something that he's never been before. Be the oldest guy, probably the oldest guy on the team besides Anderson Varejao, and be a mentor and have youth. He's never had talented youth around him. Miami's always been a very old.
Count Wally Zerbiak.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You don't, not at all. Delonte West, who's on the Clippers now, Clippers Summer League. That's pretty interesting. But yeah, he's never been that guy. He's never been one of the older guys, and he's only 20. He's not even going to be 30 years old by the start of this NBA season. So he still has a couple years in his prime. So it was an intriguing opportunity, and I'm not really surprised that he took it. It's actually a better opportunity because I would take Kyrie Irving right now over Dwayne Wade. That's just simple as that.
Well, they're both hurt about the same amount per year, but yeah, I agree with you.
That's true, but he can recover from it more than Wade can. That's for sure.
Well, and it's remarkable when you moving in and thinking about the decision 4 years ago, and how that just impacted waves upon waves of planning in the NBA. Even after the decision was made, people were looking to this year as kind of a destination year for where LeBron was going to go next, and I feel like the same thing. I mean, that was just culminated in this free agent market. Pundits everywhere have been talking about the domino effect of LeBron's decision. Bosch deciding to stay in Miami with Wade. All sorts of stuff everywhere happening. The Bulls getting into free agency talks again. For high marquee players, which hasn't happened in a long time. Yeah. And it just makes me wonder. How LeBron became really the driving force and like the representation of free agency in the league, because he basically broke the mold for the most part. I mean, there's not really been. I mean, I guess if you count Melo moving from Denver, there hasn't really been that big.
That was a trade. That was a trade.
Yeah, you're right.
Gutted the entire team. Yeah.
Yeah, so there hasn't really been like that big of a free agency, splash. Like there, especially that happens in this year. We talk about Melo, talking about Love being restricted. You're talking about LeBron as well. So DeMarcus Cousins being restricted. So you've got a lot of stuff that's out there. That's how people feel like they need to win championships now. Yeah. And some people still hold to that view, but we just saw evidence that that's just not the case. You get to be really lucky in second round picks, and you can get to the finals a couple of times.
Yeah, I mean, and I totally agree with you. It's actually really interesting if you look at the different generations in the NBA. If you look at the 80s, it was all about you have to earn everything that you get. Michael got stopped by the Pistons, Bad Boy Pistons, so many times. He got just pissed off at them, and in the 90s. It was all about Michael, all about just he was the best player and no one could beat him except for whenever he left and tried to play baseball. And then your Houston Rockets had probably the second best player of that time in the mid 90s, and he took advantage of just the best player not being there. And then 2000s you had a combination of the Lakers and the Spurs who had Big Two or Big Three, and those were acquired through draft. And so we've never really, and then the 2010s is LeBron's years, and a little bit of Spurs as well. But it's a different era. It's based, and it's all due to the collective bargaining agreement. Mm-hmm. It has put strict restrictions on players and put more money in the pockets of the owners. And things would have been differently if the players decided to hold it out even longer and really hammer out more details where that wasn't the case, but they wanted to play. So they just decided to structure it the way it is now. So it makes it hard for big threes to happen, but the NBA, they found a way to make it work. And adding free agents to make your team that much better has become something that every team looks to do. And so it's very important, and it's more exciting than the regular season, which is crazy because there's no basketball being played. And it's almost as exciting as some playoff games. It's just the anticipation. I would sit there and hear my phone buzz the ESPN da-na-na, da-na-na, and expecting to hear if LeBron was going to announce. Funny enough, I didn't find out on one of those. I just scrolling through Twitter. But yeah, it's free agency is a big thing. So.
Well, and you talking about how important it is for players to make as much money as they can, as long as they're playing. We can talk about Carmelo Anthony. He's been trying to win in New York for years, and has just shelled out just absolutely MVP seasons. I mean, you got to feel for the guy and his desperation to be marked down as a great player. You think back to the years of Michael and Olajuwon, and even Kobe and Shaq. A lot of people forget about somebody like Karl Malone. I mean, the mailman never won anything. He was stymied by the Rockets a couple of times in divisional playoffs or in conference playoffs, but he's like probably the fifth or sixth highest rebounder and like something high in points.
Second in points.
Second in points, right?
He has more points than Michael Jordan.
And Tim Duncan's the same way. I mean, Tim Duncan is a superstar, but he's the same kind of player in which, like, if he's not winning championship after championship after championship, you're not going to remember his name. In 20 years, you're thinking about this era, you think about LeBron and Kevin Durant, and you forget how good Melo or even Derrick Rose pre-injury was.
Yeah.
And so when Melo decides to stay in New York, that to me makes me a little confused, because I feel like he deserves to try to go somewhere to win. Now, obviously, being a Rockets fan, I was wishing we'd get any sort of free agent. But, you look at the teams he could have gone to, like Chicago, and you just kind of wonder, like, what is his motivation? Because if it's just money, then it totally makes sense. And in reality, that really is where his interests lie. And that's evidenced by his move for a max deal in New York. So,
the interesting thing is, though, he actually didn't take the full max. He took it's actually undisclosed, but sources say that it's about a little over 122 million for 5 years, and the max is 129. But I think the main reason, not just money, it was he trusts Phil. They got a new coach in Derek Fisher, and I think it could be interesting with that whole dynamic. You're going to see the reintroducing the triangle offense that we haven't seen since Phil last coached. And I always loved the triangle offense, just seeing the intricacies of it, and I think Melo would be great in it. This year, unfortunately, he's not winning anything. He has Andrea Bargnani and Amari Stoudemire's contracts, and they're over the salary cap with those three players. Right. They're not winning anything. So next year, they're going to have to hope and pray that they're going to get someone to pair with them. But yeah, I feel for him too. He's one of my favorite players to watch. He's just a gifted scorer, and he's going to be overlooked whenever it's all said and done if he doesn't win a championship. But yeah, I mean he's just a great player that won't do much. But question for you, Luke. What do you think is the most unexpected move so far in the NBA and the NBA free agency?
Well, most unexpected. I probably have like two. The first one isn't really like an official move. It was when the Celtics offered Gordon Hayward his giant contract of about $15 million per year. Being a Rockets fan, I knew that as soon as he was offered a contract like that, people were going to come for Parsons for about the same money, because they're basically the same player. That was just very surprising for me that the Celtics valued Gordon Hayward that high to reach that pinnacle of a contract such as that. But credit to the Jazz, and I hate saying those words, but credit to the Jazz and being able to recognize talent and recognize building a team around an efficient swingman like Gordon Hayward, and being able to match that. The other move that I found was surprising was Isaiah Thomas to Phoenix.
Yep.
Seeing their backcourt as being very muy potente. It's you've got Eric Bledsoe and Goran Dragic. You know, Bledsoe was injured for much of last year, but you're talking about a player, Goran Dragic, who could win. You know, be top 5 point guard. You know, in the league. You know, he's pushing that threshold. Another guy we let go. Kyle Lowry included, it's just rocking them up. But like that's curious to me because Isaiah Thomas, while he could be instituted in a run and gun system like they have in Phoenix, I feel like the money that they gave him to be a backup point guard is very curious. You know, he's not Nate Robinson in being totally okay in that role and being dominant in that role. Isaiah Thomas is a poor man's shorter Brandon Jennings. And True. I just don't really see the long-term plan for the Suns unless they're looking to deal Bledsoe and Dragic in the future, which they very well could be.
I totally agree with you. I was our next topic about biggest steal. I was going to say it was Isaiah Thomas. He, in my opinion, he was the last pick in his draft. I think it was 2012 draft. He was the last pick. He was the 60th pick in the draft, and he had better numbers than 50 of the draft picks that were ahead of him, or 40 that were ahead of him. Right. This guy can play. If you, like you said, you're looking at that Suns roster, you got Goran Dragic, Eric Bledsoe, and Isaiah Thomas in the backcourt, and rookie James Ennis, who they just drafted. So, also, like you said, it's pretty curious where all the minutes are going to go. I know Eric Bledsoe is going to really be the two guard, but Isaiah Thomas and James Ennis, I mean, he's probably not going to get that many minutes. He's probably going to do what most rookies do, and point guard rookies that are behind two guys, and just sit and probably be traded maybe mid-season, which is a shame because I love James Ennis at Syracuse. But yeah, I mean, another unexpected one, and I know it pains you, but is all of the failures of the Rockets this offseason with not landing anybody big. I mean, they just did Trevor Ariza, but they could have gotten Melo, and they could have. They put up him with his jersey number 7 before Jeremy Lin was traded. That was pretty interesting.
I feel like there's been two different schools of thoughts going to battle here. I feel like some people are trying to consider some of these moves as a foregone conclusion, while other people are like, hey, let's be careful about it. And, you know, like in the case of Chris Bosh, you know, like to me, I would hope that my general manager wouldn't deal, you know, our 24-minute starting, you know, point guard to, I mean, obviously Beverly's the starter, but if you look at Jeremy Lin and how many minutes he actually does get to play, you know, you consider, like, I wouldn't deal him and make that finalized so quick without 100% guarantee that Bosh was coming. Yeah. And so that kind of confusion is really weird. And now with losing Parsons for $15 million, in the last couple of days, I've kind of been okay with it because you know, that Parsons is a great player, but that's paying $15 million to your third best player on your team. Whereas the Jazz, Gordon Hayward is arguably the best player on the Jazz, next to maybe Trey Burke. But, I mean, so you can justify paying that much money to put into your starting 5, being the 1 or 2, the first or second scoring option. But as far as being the third scoring option, he didn't shoot the 3-ball well last year. He's still one of the best on-ball defenders for superstar small forwards like Kevin Durant, like LeBron James. But in the end, the cons don't outweigh the pros here, and it's just easier to let them go, albeit to Dallas. But you know, I'm just gonna have to swallow that and not go to that game.
Yeah, I think the most unexpected move really isn't the main story of this free agency. It's the unexpected stay where you are's. And like you were talking about with Chris Bosh, sources said that he was finalizing a deal with Houston, but he really wasn't. And everyone, me included, thought, oh, LeBron's gone. I'm going to go to Houston. I'm going to make money and make the money that I can, and play on a team that I'm legitimately can contribute to, and help get have a chance at a championship. So him staying in Miami was a big surprise for me. And then Melo, like we talked about, staying in New York. Once Pau Gasol was finalizing his deal with Chicago, that lets you know that Melo's not going anywhere, because Chicago was really his only option. So
I also find it different. All the big free agents, the big marquee guys, none of them moved from the East, which is just an interesting thing for me, because the West is so competitive. Anybody can finish 1 to 8, and it's just a whole different kind of ball game.
Yep.
And if you would rather, well, okay, I'm not trying to say that the Eastern Conference is bad. I'm saying that
it is.
As far as the competition level goes. Now it's getting better with the way that Washington is coming about, the way that Indiana was. I mean, they didn't show up for the final or for the playoffs really, but they have teams that are up and coming. The Hawks are eventually. You figure they're going to win a playoff series one day.
They would have if Al Horford didn't go down.
Right, and the Pistons coming up too with their with Brandon Jennings is not my favorite player, but he's my favorite on the video game. But you're talking about Greg Monroe and Andre Drummond. That's a huge front court for them. They're very, they're developing a lot. Bulls are another one in there. So, there's talent there. I just find it interesting that none of the guys really moved to the Western Conference, because they know how hard it is to actually get all the way to the top of that thing. So,
yeah, good.
Oh, I was going to say, if we wanted to move on to our best steal, yours is Isaiah Thomas. Mine is Spencer Hawes, actually, going to the Clippers for how much he got. And I really think that, that was the best case scenario deal that they could get. I was kind of teetering between that or Chris Kaman, Portland, just because Chris Kaman gives them a physicality sort of dominance, on the low block defensively, and gives them some versatility offensively as well to allow LaMarcus Aldridge to kind of float around. But I really think I'd rather go for Spencer Hawes, because that's a dude who can stretch the floor, who rebounds well, and, for the qualities that he's giving, really isn't all that much for the already, cap-happy LA Clippers.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree with you. I was saying before I knew LeBron's decision, if he was going to stay in Miami, the first player that they needed to go after was someone like Luol Deng. And they ended up signing. He ended up signing him after LeBron left. But first was to bring that defense back, the defensive identity back to the Heat, and second was go after Spencer Hawes, because he is exactly what they lack. He is someone that can fit in their system, their surround LeBron James with three-point shooter system, but also fill the void of they need a big man to rebound and guard Tim Duncan or guard Dwight Howard or guard someone who's going to really impose themselves on their defense. I commend the Clippers for doing it. They definitely helped DeAndre Jordan. His minutes have gone up since Doc Rivers has been the coach, and he's playing big minutes, and he's having to do a little bit more than he probably can. And so that, with no real backup center to help him out. So I think that definitely helps him out. But yeah, I mean, we're not going to talk about how Cleveland stole LeBron from the Miami Heat. I mean, that should be the biggest steal. Cleveland people are probably saying that. I mean, that's a pretty big steal in my book. But yeah, so definitely free agency has been one heck of a storm, and it's LeBron's hold on the league was crazy how no moves were really being done until he made his decision. So
and we'll just be in the same boat in 2 years from now. Yeah. I did want to mention another steal that I thought was or maybe not a steal, but it was a really interesting move by the Thunder to get Anthony Morrow. Talk about a guy who can really shoot the three-point ball. That just gives them another weapon to really surround how physically dominant they are up and down on the floor. And I was really disappointed by the Thunder this year, and that's what their mantra has kind of been. They get there and then something happens, or something kind of gets in the way of them making the finals, and it just makes you wonder. Like they got one more year left in them before Westbrook comes up. They got 2 more years till KD comes up, and it just makes you wonder. Is the clock ticking for them as well? So you're thinking about that summer, and then the summer following, and then LeBron will be up again. And so it's all these questions, and everybody's kind of setting their clocks and their alarm clocks for a certain amount of time in the league, just to maneuver themselves in a position that would be attractive to those free agents. So it's just a really interesting time in the league right now, as people are trying to chase the big money guys and just keep track of their interests and what they really want to do.
Yeah, and that's another thing that free agency has sort of defined the league as we know it right now. Is people are that and statistical analysis of the NBA and really finding what guys are worth the money that they're getting paid, and the production equates to the salary that they get. So people are, GMs and owners are looking at guys that 2-3 years in the future that they want, and they know their contract. So yeah, it's definitely shaped the NBA as we know it. And like you said earlier, LeBron has really kind of kick-started that campaign and since his decision. But yeah, it's definitely a fun time in the NBA, free agency. But now it's over, and now we just have to look forward to
wait till September.
Yeah, September, whenever basketball starts up again. So
just watch a bunch of summer league highlights. I can watch Nick Johnson's dunk for a while.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I can watch that for a while.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think that's all we have to talk about today. But
I just wanted to mention our current website. We're going to start revamping it soon. It's marooncollarsports.weebly.com. We got some posts up there that are kind of old, but we're looking to update and overhaul our website to really use moving forward, and we encourage you guys to check it out.
Absolutely, and we will. We plan on doing this. We weren't joined by Chase Burns today, but he will be an active part in these Tall Guys podcasts. So look for him in the future. We plan on doing these as often as every week. So keep looking for these. And yeah, like Luke said, our website, marooncollarsports.weebly.com. So yeah, check us out there, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, guys.